So I am a professional intelligence officer. That's all I've done my adult life. I went to a small Lutheran school, did Russian studies, went to graduate school in Indiana University doing international relations and Soviet studies, as one does in the 1970s. That was the thing to do, and went all the way through to getting a PhD, and actually went on the job market and had some job offers from universities. But I had also been recruited at the same time to come to work for the U.S. intelligence community, and I ended up doing that. It made sense for me because I spoke Russian and I did my academic work on the Soviet Navy, so it was a perfect fit. And that was almost 40 years ago, and that's really all I've ever done. I've done naval intelligence as a civilian. Partway through that process, the admiral that I worked for, the director of naval intelligence, asked me, "So Barry, where did you get your military service?" I looked the part. I had short hair, but I'd never been in the military, so he fixed it. He ordered me to go to the Naval Processing Center, Baltimore, and get a commission as a naval officer. So I did those in parallel for a while. I did an entire career as a naval intelligence officer while I was still working as a civilian in naval intelligence. In the 90s, after the Cold War ended and the wall came down and the Soviet Union disappeared, I made a conscious decision. That's the wrong business to be in. No one's going to care about the Russians anymore. So I switched into drug law enforcement, and I went to DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, in the mid 1990s. We focused largely on what we called narco terrorists, drug traffickers who used terrorist means against the United States, including we used to brief about Osama bin Laden in the years before he carried out the 9/11 attempts. So after 9/11, I was at DEA, and I brought DEA back into the intelligence community. We were the 16th member of the intelligence community at the time for the purpose of sharing terrorism with law enforcement information. Then more recently, I left DEA about 15 years ago, and I have been a senior executive in the intelligence community since then. I've worked on mission management. I've worked on intelligence training and education. I was the historian of the IC for about a year and a half. And now I'm the defense intelligence officer for counter-narcotics and organized crime. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Throughout all of that, I've been a member of IAFI, the International Association for Intelligence Education, and I was the longest serving president of IAFI. I retired this past summer, and I very much wanted to be able to come and be with you today.
Coming from your career perspective and point of view, what's a misunderstanding that you think needs to be noted?
The shorthand concept is moral courage. It's something that's not taught in most universities, and it's certainly not taught in many government training enterprises. And here's what it means. Intelligence professionals, as a great function of state, alongside defense, law enforcement, diplomacy, tax collection, what have you. We're the only ones that exist to give bad news to the boss because we don't have an agenda. We're supposed to bring objective information to leadership, even when it's not something they want to hear, or actually because it's something they don't want to hear. No one else is going to do it. That's why we exist. The moral courage here is about this. If we do good intelligence work based on data, objective analysis that's not biased, we're going to find ourselves at some point in the career. I certainly have faced this several times, where we're going to have to bring information to the boss that the boss doesn't want to hear and is going to be angry about because it's going to undermine his or her pet project or pet policy. We have to be prepared as intelligence professionals to do that, even at risk of short-term career consequences. What I mean is giving bad news to the boss could lead to you being fired. And that's why it's called moral courage, not physical courage. At least in the West, we don't run a risk of being executed. I don't know about the Russian intelligence services or the Chinese intelligence services. So what I've been doing over the past several years is trying to speak every chance I get in my classrooms, teaching for other people, speaking up professional associations about this concept of moral courage and how you know when you can bring that forward. And it's not taught enough, and it's something that is not understood that intelligence professionals will face at least once in their career. The formal approach of red teaming, it is a very good SAT, structured analytic technique. It's a subset, I think, of wargaming, right? Which I know you guys are doing a lot of today. And it comes to play when there is an inflection point in security affairs, trying to be able to figure out what the other side actually has in mind. So here, I told you I'd come back to drug law enforcement, which is what I do professionally. So as your group may or may not know, fentanyl, which is a opioid smuggled into the United States by Mexican cartels, built from chemicals that come from China, legal chemicals that come from China. Fentanyl also gets smuggled into Canada. There's also cartels operating in Canada. Up until very, very recently, the cartels and the Mexican state have been at a standoff. The cartels don't want to overthrow the Mexican state. They don't want that. They want to be left alone. And the Mexican state either can't or won't suppress the cartels. That's been a stable arrangement for 70 years that the cartels profit very highly by. There's been a shift in policy in the United States, and there's about to be a concomitant shift in policy in Canada to be able to recognize that fentanyl is a national security threat. It kills 100,000 Americans a year, and I don't know the number in Canada. It's less than 100,000, but of course there's fewer Canadians than there are Americans. But this is a threat brought into our two countries by a foreign power, and I know our country is, and I believe Canada as well. It's going to be alongside us, putting more pressure on the cartels than we ever have before, either with or without the Mexicans. This could result in a change in the calculus where the cartels decide to push back stronger, or that the cartels decide to use different kinds of scientific methods in order to manufacture drugs and move them around the world. And we know that the organic chemists, university trained organic chemists that make this stuff, use AI tools to help them change their chemical formulations in order to avoid, when chemicals are listed, to get around restrictions. We know that they do that, but we haven't really war gamed how that process works. We can do the same. We can use artificial intelligence to manage large amounts of data to be able to process what's going on, the changes that exist, and help us get ahead of the game and help try and figure out what the cartels are going to be doing in the future. That's going to be a major focus for the United States. It already is in terms of policy that's been stated. You can read the executive orders. It already is in terms of where the Defense Department and law enforcement agencies are putting their resources. But one thing that we haven't done, at least not that I'm aware, is actually sat down as a formal analytic approach and war gamed out how will the cartels act when we put pressure on them. And I have been trying to work with colleagues on both sides of our mutual border to sit down together and do exactly this, to do some war gaming, to get to the future. And that's what we need smart minds for. And who knows, maybe some of the people that are there in RCMI today will eventually join us in that effort.